He paid me to be his wife. Then I took everything. Part 3. Chapter 17, The Real Villains. The walls of Clarke Tower didn't shake. But something inside them shifted. Damon and May sat side by side in the private strategy suite on the 64th floor, the one used only for executive emergency sessions. The room was cold, dim, locked from the inside. Their world had narrowed to 2 chairs, a screen, and a war they were finally fighting together. On the monitor, spreadsheet after spreadsheet, internal memos, surveillance snapshots, and 2 names at the center of it all. Vivian Clarke. Bryce Sterling. It began with the flash drive Damon had recovered the compliance officer's archive. But it only took May's eye to notice the pattern, a series of shadow transactions, layered beneath 3 layers of shell corporations. The money always moved in threes, from project budgets to consulting firms to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. It started 5 years ago, she said, voice steady. Small amounts. Laundered through fake consulting work. Damon's mouth was tight. Projects my father helped build. Contracts I signed off on. She looked at him. They used your name as a shield. And it worked. 4 years. Until James Roberts discovered a duplicate budget line in a proposal for a Clarke Global water treatment expansion. Something didn't add up. He flagged it. Brought it to internal compliance. And that's when the frame job began. Emails recovered from the backup archives confirmed it. Vivian sent internal notices calling James unstable, and Bryce fabricated a whistleblower complaint suggesting he had offered sensitive schematics to competitors. There was no proof, just internal noise, strategically placed. Just enough to trigger an investigation. Damon had been on a 2-week business tour in Tokyo when it happened. When he returned, the file had already passed through legal and HR. All he had to do was sign. I should have looked closer, Damon said. His voice cracked. May stared at her father's photo on the screen. Not broken. Not disgraced. Just tired. They took everything from him and called it protocol. She whispered, I spent 4 years aiming at the wrong man. Damon turned to her. Then aim with me now. The final piece came in the form of a voice message left on the dying compliance officer's burner phone. May played it out loud, her hands shaking. I wanted to stop it. But they threatened my family. They said if I talked, they'd bury me like they buried Roberts. Vivian gave the order. Bryce moved the money. Damon, he didn't know. He never knew. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. May dropped the phone when it ended. Damon caught her. They sat in silence. Not awkward. Just exhausted. They wanted your empire, May said. That's why they set your house on fire and blamed my father. And they almost got it, Damon muttered. She looked at him. What are you going to do? He looked at her right back. We're going to burn them first. Vivian reclined in her designer chair, swirling a glass of imported red. She didn't know they were coming. She didn't know they had proof. She didn't know that her brother and the woman she tried to scare off were now co-conspirators and no longer playing defense. I chased the wrong enemy for years. I built a war on grief and pain, and I nearly destroyed someone who didn't deserve it. But the truth was never about him. The real villains are inside his house. And I'm done waiting for justice to wake up. We're going to drag it out, screaming if we have to. Chapter 18, Enemies to Allies. May never thought she'd be in a war room with Damon Clarke, not as the enemy, but as the ally. They sat across from each other in a locked conference suite inside Clarke Tower's executive floor. No assistants, no lawyers, no board members. Just 2 former enemies, stacks of evidence, and the shared knowledge of betrayal. A single whiteboard behind them was covered in circles and arrows. At the center, Vivian Clarke. Beside her, Bryce Sterling. Underneath, fraud, obstruction, whistleblower suppression, embezzlement, and asset laundering. Everything was ready to come crashing down. But first, they had to play the part. Vivian's smart, May said, arms folded. And paranoid. She'll smell blood if we move too fast, Damon agreed. She'll run. Burn records. Cover the trail. So we let her believe she's still winning. They crafted the plan like they were building a glass bomb. Step 1, a very public rupture. Step 2, internal distractions. A fake compliance audit initiated by May under the guise of cleaning up Damon's mess. Step 3, real data fed anonymously to 2 federal investigators May had already contacted months ago quietly, carefully. And finally, Step 4, the ambush. They staged it on the steps of a Clarke Global charity event. The press had been swarming them for weeks ever since Damon disappeared and returned with no answers. May wore red. Damon wore black. Opposites, cold, poised. The cameras caught everything. Damon looked away as May said sharply, "I'm done pretending." "I never asked you to lie," he snapped back, voice raised. "You never asked me anything." Reporters gasped. May ripped the diamond ring from her finger and dropped it in his palm. "Go back to your silence, Damon. It's what you're best at." She turned and walked down the stairs alone. Scene shift, social media and headlines. It's over, May Roberts ends engagement with Damon Clarke. Clarke empire crumbling? Inside the disappearance, return, and public meltdown. Was she the spy? Was he the tyrant? Exactly what they wanted. Inside the penthouse, May and Damon watched the clips over takeout sushi, exhausted but victorious in their deception. "You were dramatic," Damon said between bites. "You were cold." "It worked," he said. "It's not enough." They both looked at the wall where Vivian's face sat at the center of their plan. Vivian leaned against her office window, watching the city sparkle like prey. "She's gone," she said, sipping her champagne. "Finally." Bryce chuckled. "Should have known she'd crumble eventually." Vivian turned toward him, expression sharp. "Now that Damon's distracted, we move forward with the transfer," she said. Phase 2, restructure Clarke Global, lock Damon out of executive control, shift majority vote to their hands. "What if he catches on?" Bryce asked. Vivian smiled. "Then we do what we've always done." That night, Damon stood alone in his office. His hand rested on a photo of him and Vivian as children on a beach, barefoot, smiling. He didn't look away from it as he whispered, "You're still my sister." His voice cracked. "But I won't protect you anymore." He dropped the frame into a drawer and locked it. Later that night, May sat beside Damon on the penthouse balcony. The city glittered below them. Neither spoke for a long time. "I know what this costs you," she said. "She raised me," he replied. "Held my hand through our father's funeral. Was there when I built this company. But she also buried my father," May said softly. "And tried to bury you, too." He nodded. "I've spent most of my life saving Clarke Global," Damon said. "Now I'll burn it if I have to." May looked at him. "Really looked? You mean that?" He turned to her, eyes steel. "I do." They sat in silence, shoulder to shoulder. Two broken pieces in the same war. Enemies no longer. Just allies with matches. "We're pretending to fall apart, just to hold something else together. This is no longer about revenge. This is about truth." "He's still haunted by the girl in the photo. I'm still haunted by the man who signed my father's end. But now we're staring at the same enemy. And I'd rather fight beside the devil who changed, than the angels who lied." Chapter 19, The Coup. It started with a misdirected email. May was in Vivian's office invited under the pretense of a charitable transition after her breakup with Damon. Vivian had played the perfect queen, cool, generous, condescending in that soft, aristocratic way that always made May want to break crystal just to hear something shatter. I thought we could repurpose your position for media strategy, Vivian had said, fingers tapping gently on her Mont Blanc pen. You were quite effective while you lasted. May had smiled, happy to fade gracefully. Vivian's assistant had entered with a folder labeled confidential, vote package priority. Vivian snatched it before May could get a glance. Almost. But one name on the visible cover sheet burned itself into May's brain before the folder disappeared. Transfer of voting rights Clarke Global. She hacked into the company server that night using a backdoor Damon's CTO had quietly re-enabled for her weeks ago. It took 20 minutes to bypass the encryption on Vivian's private board folder. And when she opened the master file, her stomach dropped. Operation, Atlas executed by V. Clarke and B. Sterling. Objective, transfer of executive authority from D. Clarke to provisional chair. Effective, pending majority board vote on Q3 earnings meeting. May read the document 3 times. The summary was clear. Vivian and Bryce planned to remove Damon permanently. Not just as CEO but from the board entirely. They'd been gathering silent votes, manipulating proxy owners, bribing mid-level shareholders with future dividends and phantom equity. The vote was already scheduled. 4 days away. A clean, corporate coup. She burst into Damon's study without knocking. Her coat was soaked from rain, her cheeks flushed from adrenaline. He looked up from the fireplace. What happened? They're going to take everything, she said. Not someday. Now. She threw the printed documents on the table. The vote's in 4 days. They've locked in 5 board members. All they need is 1 more. Damon's eyes darkened. They were never going to wait. They're planning to use your silence against you. Your disappearance. The fake breakup. They're going to call you unstable. Distracted. Emotionally compromised. He stared at the paper for a long moment. Then he picked it up and tore it in half. I gave them my name, he said. And they turned it into a weapon. May and Damon gathered their loyalists, Marcus, the CFO, Suki, head of legal, and one trusted old guard from Damon's father's harem, Mr. Hanley, retired but still with quiet influence on the board. They moved like chess masters. Fast. Surgical. Ruthless. They began reverse tracking shareholder proxies. May found 2 minor investors who'd been bribed with fake land bonds from Bryce's company. They were flipped within hours. Damon recorded a statement for the full board, laying out the financial mismanagement and pending legal questions around Project Atlas. They compiled enough evidence to stall Vivian's plan, but not stop it. Not yet. They still needed 1 more vote. Vivian stood in her office, wine untouched, phone in hand as her assistant stammered through the update. What do you mean Hanley's voting with Damon? We think May got to him. Vivian's jaw clenched. Of course she did. Bryce stepped in. Should we postpone the vote? Vivian stared at the skyline. No, she said coldly. We go through with it. And if they think they've seen what I'm capable of, they haven't even begun. They're not bluffing, May said. Vivian's too arrogant to back down. We need insurance, Damon replied. May held up a flash drive. I already have it. Bryce's offshore accounts. Vivian's shell companies. Fake compliance reports. I've got enough to bury them both. Damon paused, eyes on her. You're not just a weapon anymore, he said. I never was, she whispered. You just weren't ready to see me. He nodded. 1 more vote, he said. That's all we need. She smiled, slow and dangerous. Then let's win. They're close. So close to winning. But I've already walked through fire for this. I've already bled for the truth. And now that we're side by side, they'll never see the knife coming. Chapter 20, Judgment Day. The boardroom was a cathedral. Long, polished table. Chairs like thrones. floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the steel and glass heart of Manhattan. But today, this temple wasn't for worship. It was for execution. The full Clarke Global Board had been summoned for a special vote. Vivian Clarke sat at the head of the table like the crowned queen she believed herself to be. Calm. Radiant in slate-grey silk. Bryce beside her, cufflinks glinting, smug in his silence. May stood near the corner of the room, dark suit sharp, hair tied back, the image of control. Damon wasn't there yet. That was part of the plan. Vivian stood, hands folded in front of her like a benevolent monarch. As chair of this emergency meeting, I move to open discussion on the proposed transfer of executive leadership in light of recent instability. Her voice was sweetly venomous. Damon's emotional withdrawal, his sudden absences, the PR disasters, they leave us exposed. The board must consider whether it's in Clarke Global's best interest to appoint new stewardship. Bryce passed folders to each member. The so-called evidence. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded. One vote. That was all she needed. She smiled. Let's begin. The door opened without announcement. Damon Clarke stepped in, dressed in the black suit he wore to bury his father. Vivian's smile didn't falter. I didn't think you'd come. Damon didn't look at her. He walked to the center of the room, silent, calm, and then turned. You've seen one version of the story, he said. Now you'll see the truth. He nodded to May. She opened her laptop. Connected to the projector. The screen behind them came alive. The evidence. Small black square voice recordings of the late compliance officer naming Vivian and Bryce. Small black square shell company charts linking Bryce's firms to embezzled Clarke funds. Small black square internal memos signed by Vivian directing suppression of whistleblower reports. Small black square the doctored file on James A. Roberts side by side with the original, untouched version. And finally, May played the voice recording from Vivian's own assistant, unaware she was being taped. Ms. Clarke said if anyone uncovers the Atlas plan early, we burn the backups and pin the mess on Damon. She's done it before. She'll do it again. The silence that followed was a rupture. Vivian's voice was the first to break it, sharp and trembling. This is absurd. Fabricated. Damon turned to her, face unreadable. I trusted you, he said. And you used my name to cover your crimes. You let this woman turn you against your own family. No, May cut in. You did that all by yourself. Bryce stood, furious. This is a power grab. A performance. Two men in dark suits entered the room. Federal agents. Quiet. Lethal. Holding arrest warrants. Vivian Clarke. Bryce Sterling. You're under arrest for corporate fraud, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. Gasps around the boardroom. Chairs scraped. Someone dropped their pen. Vivian's face cracked. She lunged for Damon's arm. Don't do this. We're blood. He didn't flinch. You stopped being my sister the moment you buried May's father. The agents cuffed her. Bryce shouted about lawyers. About stocks. About ruin. But it didn't matter. They were let out like fallen royalty. And the board, the loyalists, the opportunists, the quiet doubters all looked to Damon. And to May. The boardroom emptied slowly. Some left with shame. Some with awe. Some just grateful they hadn't been dragged down with the traitors. May stayed behind. Damon stood at the window, hands in his pockets, face hard. She walked to him. They didn't speak for a moment. Then, softly, she said. Now we rebuild. He turned to her, jaw tense, eyes red-rimmed but steady. You still want this? After everything? No, she said. Not like this. She stepped closer. But if we rebuild it together honestly, from the ground up it won't be Clarke Global anymore. It'll be something better. He took her hand. Held it tight. Nodded once. Justice isn't always clean. It's not always triumphant. But today, it was loud enough to shake the foundations of a kingdom built on lies. Vivian is gone. Bryce is gone. The lies are gone. The man I tried to destroy is now the man I trust to build with. And for the first time, I believe in the future. Chapter 21, Boardroom Bloody. The Clarke Global Annual Shareholders Meeting was meant to be a celebration. Polished glasses. High ceilings. Velvet seats in the Grand Regency Hall of Midtown. 1,000 shareholders gathered dressed in suits, pearls, and power. The future of the company was supposed to be decided today. Behind doors. On paper. Quietly. But May Roberts didn't do quiet anymore. Vivian Clarke was backstage with Bryce's emergency legal counsel. Her dress was flawless, sleek silver, designed to signal calm wealth. The chaos of her arrest weeks ago had been spun as a misunderstanding by her crisis team. Bryce was out on bail. The media had been temporarily quieted. She still believed she had the votes. Still believed Damon would be too broken to return. Still believed May was finished. "I'll give a speech after the proxy vote," she told her aide, smoothing her hair. "Are you sure the press won't ask about the charges?" Vivian smiled coldly. "By the time they find out the truth, I'll be holding the pen to rewrite it." Damon entered first. Heads turned. Cameras clicked. He looked every inch the storm, a tailored suit, no tie, jaw locked like stone. Behind him, Marcus and Hanley followed, their expressions tight. Vivian froze when she saw him. Then May stepped into view. The entire room shifted. Gone was the elegant trophy wife of old. May wore a steel grey suit and heels that echoed like a verdict as she crossed the floor straight toward the shareholder stage. Her hair was pinned, severe. Her expression was ice. Vivian's mask cracked. "You don't belong here," she hissed under her breath as May passed. "Watch me," May whispered back. Vivian took the mic. "As interim chairwoman, I move to approve the proposed structural realignment of Clarke Global Industries and the reassignment of executive authority to the permanent board." A murmur. Everyone knew what it meant. She was claiming Damon's company. One by one, the votes began. 3 in her favor. Then 4. Then 5. The 6th came from Hanley. "I abstain," he said. The room shifted again. Vivian's jaw clenched. Then May stood and walked forward, not to the microphone but to the projector console. "Actually," she said, her voice ringing through the room, "I have something to share before the final vote." Vivian snapped, "You have no authority here." "Correction," May said, turning toward the audience. "I have evidence. And as of 7:04 a.m. today, I have a federal subpoena confirming its legitimacy." She plugged in a flash drive. The screen behind her flickered. Financial ledgers. Transfers from Clarke subsidiaries to shell firms. Vivian's voice in intercepted calls. A forged compliance audit. Bryce's signature on 5 criminal payments. Then came the final blow. A recorded confession from Bryce, under pressure from federal investigators. Vivian planned it. She used her brother's silence as a shield. She thought she could bury Roberts and anyone else who stood in the way. The room exploded. Board members stood. Shareholders gasped. Cameras clicked like a thunderstorm. May didn't flinch. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, facing the stunned crowd, "you were nearly robbed by your own leadership. But Clarke Global doesn't belong to thieves." At that moment, the doors opened. 2 federal agents stepped in, cutting through the silence like a knife. "Vivian Clarke," one said. "No," she began, stepping back. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, corporate espionage, obstruction, and conspiracy." They cuffed her. The silence was violent. Vivian turned one last time toward Damon. "Tell them this was her doing," she whispered, eyes wild. "She ruined your name." Damon didn't speak. He just watched her go. The vote resumed. Vivian's proxies were disqualified. Damon was reinstated as executive chair. But before the gavel dropped, Hanley rose. "There's one final motion from the Emergency Shareholder Committee," he said. He turned toward May. "We propose May Roberts as the new Chief Executive Officer of Clarke Global." Gasps. May blinked. "What?" Damon stood beside her, silent, eyes burning with emotion. "You saved this company," Hanley said. "You saw what we didn't. You earned this." A pause. The room waited. May looked at Damon. He nodded, just once. "I accept," she said. The cameras were gone. The room was empty. Damon stood beside her. She was staring out at the skyline, the city she once wanted to burn. "It's yours now," he said. She turned to him. Eyes steady. Voice quiet. "No. It's ours." She stepped into his arms. "Now we rebuild. They tried to take everything. They called me a placeholder. A pawn. A waitress in silk. Now I sit in the chair they never thought I'd reach. And beside me stands the man I once swore to destroy. Funny how the fire didn't consume us. It crowned us." Chapter 22, A Kingdom Reclaimed. The ink on the arrest warrants was barely dry when Clarke Tower began to change. Not loudly. Not with fire. But with quiet, decisive strokes that redefined an empire. Gone were the portraits of boardroom legends who looked more like phantoms than pioneers. Gone were the fake charity projects, the inflated budget sheets, the manipulated compliance logs. Gone was the illusion. In its place stood May Roberts. And beside her, no longer in front of her, was Damon Clarke. It happened in a private ceremony, witnessed by the legal team, Marcus, Hanley, and 2 federal observers. Damon signed the final authorization to step down from the CEO role. May would assume full executive control effective immediately. The Clarke name remained on the building. But the power behind the name, the sharp mind, the iron fist, the fire now belonged to the woman who once walked through its lobby as a waitress pretending not to flinch. Damon passed her the symbolic Clarke signet pen. Heavy. Gold. A little absurd. "You sure about this?" he asked softly. She didn't hesitate. "I've never been more sure of anything." She signed. And just like that the kingdom was hers. They stood side by side, hands barely brushing. May addressed the press with calm command. "Effective today, I have accepted the role of CEO at Clarke Global Industries. Our future will not be built on silence or shadow. It will be built on transparency, innovation, and justice." A reporter called out, "Ms. Roberts, some say your relationship with Mr. Clarke was a scandal turned power grab. What do you say to them?" May smiled. "They're half right. It was a power grab. And now I intend to use that power, to clean house." Another asked, "Are you and Mr. Clarke still together?" This time Damon answered. "We started with a lie. We rebuilt it with the truth. What we have now is real. And that's not the headline, it's the foundation. Now hers. Same view. Same steel and glass skyline. But the feeling had changed. There were new photos on the shelf, not magazine covers or awards. Her mother's scarf. A sketch of her father. A candid photo of her and Damon laughing in Central Park, taken by accident. Damon stood in the doorway, watching her settle in. "Want me to hang around for your first official call?" he asked. She turned in her chair, legs crossed. Confident. Calm. "No," she said. "I need to do this alone." He raised a brow, then smiled. "I'll be in the other office." The one with less power but better scotch. She laughed, just once, and it cracked the last layer of ice between them. Before he left, she stood and walked to him. They didn't say anything. They just held each other. Not for reassurance, but in recognition. This was no longer a contract. No longer a stage. No longer revenge. This was something earned. They lay in bed in the quiet glow of city lights, not tangled in passion but in peace. His hand rested over hers. No guards. No schemes. Do you regret it? He asked. The plan? No, he said. The marriage. She turned her head to face him. I regret the silence, she said. Not the man. He smiled. You terrify me sometimes. Good, she whispered. Because I'm just getting started. They said I wasn't born for this world. But I wasn't born for theirs. I carved my own. The man I once hated is now the only person I trust at my back. And the company I swore to burn, now carries my signature. The kingdom has been reclaimed. Not by name. By truth. By fire. By me. Chapter 23, The Wedding of the Century. They had already signed one marriage contract. That one had ink but no feeling. Paper but no promise. An agreement of power. A mask. But this was not a contract. This was a vow. This was a throne rebuilt in love and ash and fire. And the world watched it unfold. The venue was a Gothic cathedral in the heart of Manhattan, built of black stone and silver glass. Hand restored for this day. Not religious ritualistic. No flowers. No garlands. The aisle was obsidian. The candles burned cold silver. The stained glass above shimmered in deep violet and sharp onyx. Everything looked like fire and ice had kissed and made peace. Exactly like them. No string quartet. Instead, a 12-piece orchestra playing a haunting, cinematic arrangement May commissioned from a forgotten composer she'd found in Paris. Over 500 guests sat in reverent silence, investors, celebrities, journalists, rivals, allies, enemies. Every single one of them knew. This was no fairy tale. This was a coronation. She entered the cathedral doors in a gown made of stormlight, hand-beaded silver veils cascading from her shoulders, wrapping around her like armor disguised as silk. Her crown was minimalist. Sharp. Her heels struck the aisle like punctuation. No father walked her down. She walked herself. Not because she was alone. But because she had arrived. Damon stood waiting at the altar in a tailored black suit lined in midnight silver. No tie. His cufflinks bore the original Clarke crest, now engraved with her initials beside it. His hands trembled just once when he saw her. Because this time, he wasn't marrying a stranger. He was marrying the woman who had survived him. The priest didn't ask if anyone objected. No one would have dared. May and Damon stood facing each other beneath an arch of dark crystal. Behind them, 1,000 years of glass shimmered with refracted light. May went first. Her voice was steady, smooth as smoke. I came into your life with a blade behind my smile. I wore hate like perfume. But even then, even when I tried to destroy you, you made space for my fire. She paused. Looked him in the eyes. I don't vow to be soft. Or quiet. Or easy to love. I vow to be true. To fight with you. To fight for you. And to rule beside you not as your shadow, but as your equal. A soft, collective inhale rippled through the cathedral. Damon took her hands. His voice cracked just slightly. You were never what I expected. You were what I needed to become the man I couldn't be alone. You challenged me. Broke me. Rebuilt me. You held my name in your mouth like a curse, and now you carry it like a crown. I vow to never forget what it cost us to stand here. I vow to never fear your strength or ask you to dim your fire. I will rise beside you. I will protect what we build. And I will love you fully, fiercely, and forever. The priest paused. By fire and ash, by truth and choice you are now bound. May and Damon kissed. Not like a fairy tale. Like a signature at the end of a war. The reception was held in the penthouse atop Clarke Tower. Transformed into a glass ballroom above the clouds. Black velvet. Silver orchids. A slow-burning jazz quartet. Ice sculptures shaped like phoenixes and wolves. No wedding cake instead, towers of silver macaron pyramids dusted in edible platinum. May changed into a second dress, sleek, liquid gunmetal that clung like resolve. Her hair down, her crown gone. Because she didn't need it anymore. Damon never left her side. They danced once. Just once. But no one spoke over it. The CEO and her consort. The fire and the fortress. The waitress and the king. Two weapons that had learned to trust each other's aim. We never needed a perfect story. We needed a true one. This began in smoke and scheming. It ends with the world watching me kiss the man I once swore to ruin. And now? I will build a dynasty. Not for revenge. But for us. Chapter 24, The Past Breaks In. 1 year later. Clarke Tower was no longer just a symbol of power. It was hers. Under May Roberts Clarke, Clarke Global had become a titan of clean energy innovation and global ethics reform. Corporate news outlets once skeptical of her now hailed her as the Iron Flame, fierce, honest, incorruptible. Her photo was on the cover of every major business magazine. And right below the headline, in gold print. She burned the empire down. Then built it better. But May didn't care about the articles. Not today. Because today, she was 7 months pregnant. And feeling the full weight of building a future literally and symbolically. May padded barefoot through the penthouse of their estate just outside the city. Modern architecture carved into glass and stone, it overlooked the Hudson like a crown on a cliff. Damon was away in D.C. for a brief policy summit. Just a 24-hour trip. He'd hesitated to leave her but May insisted. It's one night, she said, her hand on her belly. We've survived worse. It was raining. Not heavily. Just enough to cast the city in silver streaks. She curled on the couch in one of Damon's old sweaters, half listening to a podcast, half writing new policy notes on her tablet. She never saw the security feed flicker. Or the lightning strike in the distance. Or the light go out. It started with a hum. Then the entire estate fell dark. The backup generators didn't kick in. May's tablet screen went black in her hands. She sat up slowly. What the? Then the security alarm, usually silent, chirped once. A forced reboot. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She reached for her phone. No signal. Only then did she feel the presence. A whisper of something off in the air. Like a memory rising from the floorboards. 2 weeks earlier, Vivian Clarke had staged a violent breakout from federal holding. The warden had called it surgical, inhuman, and personal. Bryce had died 6 months prior, stabbed in a prison brawl. The official reports said gang violence. But May had always suspected Vivian arranged it. They had tried to suppress the news of her escape. The FBI warned Damon 2 days ago but didn't believe she'd go after May while visibly pregnant. They underestimated her. Vivian hadn't come for power this time. She'd come for blood. May moved through the darkened hall, barefoot, every step deliberate. She knew the floor plan better than anyone. She didn't call for help. Instead, she moved toward the secured cabinet in Damon's private office where he kept a handgun, just in case. Halfway there, a whisper sliced the dark. Still walking like a queen. Even with your kingdom full of ghosts. May froze. She turned slowly. Vivian Clarke stepped from the shadows, soaked from the rain, face gaunt, hair wild and dripping down her cheekbones. She was thinner. But her eyes were alive with something feral. I wanted to wait until the baby came, Vivian said, voice calm. But I couldn't. I dreamed about this too long. May's voice was low. Even. You're not walking out of here. Vivian smiled. Neither are you. She lunged. May dodged barely. Her body was slower now. Her balance off. She didn't scream. She moved. Vivian grabbed her wrist. They struggled. May twisted free. Kicked the table lamp. Darkness. Chaos. She stumbled back toward the hallway, reaching for anything. Then. A gunshot. But not from her. Damon burst through the side entrance like a storm. Rain on his coat, face pale, gun in hand. The FBI had tipped him too late, but not too late to matter. He saw the shape of May's silhouette at the end of the corridor. Her hands braced on the wall. Her body heaving. Vivian turned to face him, blood on her wrist from broken glass. Hello, brother, she hissed. He aimed the gun. I told them you'd try this. She laughed, a mad, broken sound. You picked her over me. Over blood. You're not blood anymore. Vivian lunged. One shot. She collapsed mid-lunge. Not dead. But bleeding. Crumpled. Eyes wide with hatred and pain. The sirens echoed seconds later. The FBI cuffed Vivian. This time, there would be no bail, no loopholes, no escape. She didn't speak as they dragged her out. But her eyes stayed on May the entire time. He held her in the hallway, arms wrapped around her like a shield. She wasn't crying. But her hands were shaking. She came for our child, she said. She didn't touch you, he whispered. She never will. I should have killed her. No, he said. You didn't have to. You won already. May looked down at her belly. Their future. Unbroken. Unshaken. The past doesn't knock. It breaks in. But tonight, it didn't win. She tried to take what mattered most. But this time, she didn't walk away. I didn't need revenge. I needed to protect what I love. And I did. Chapter 25, The Crown Bleeds. The night before it happened, May dreamed of fire. Not chaos, not destruction, but a slow, smoldering warmth. A fireplace. A lullaby. A cradle rocking softly in a room filled with pale gold light. And then the fire blinked out. She woke with a gasp. She was still in the nursery. 7 days from her due date. She had fallen asleep in the rocking chair, one hand curled instinctively around her stomach, the other around the nameplate on the crib. Clara Hope Clarke. The name Damon chose. The middle name May had whispered to the stars when she still wasn't sure she'd survive long enough to give it. The rain started just after midnight. Another blackout warning had been issued, but the estate's backup grid was stable now. May stood, stretching slowly, her hand on her swollen belly. She was alone only for a few hours. Damon had gone to oversee final security upgrades after Vivian's last escape attempt. A formality. They had already won. The case was sealed. Vivian's last appeal had been denied. Maximum security was non-negotiable. They were safe. Until the faintest click of metal. A whisper of breath. And a voice. Still wearing a crown, even when you bleed. May turned. Vivian stood in the doorway. Vivian was thinner now, skin tight against bone, eyes hollow, soul feral. She had clawed her way through locked doors, stolen uniforms, and corpses to get here. This wasn't an escape. This was her suicide mission. You took everything, Vivian said, stepping forward. My brother. My empire. My legacy. No, May said, standing her ground. You burned your own name. I just showed them the fire. Vivian pulled a knife from her belt. jagged, homemade, sharp enough to scar. I'm going to make sure your daughter never breathes, she said. May's heart stopped. She stepped back instinctively, shielding her stomach, inching toward the emergency panic button near the bookshelf. Vivian moved faster. She lunged. A crack. A shout. And then Damon was there. He tackled Vivian to the ground. The knife skittered across the floor, spinning beneath the crib. She screamed in rage, not fear. They fought in silence broken only by grunts, fists, and the thunder outside. She hit him across the cheek with a shard of glass. He pinned her again. Why, he gasped. Why come here? Because she wins, Vivian spat. And I couldn't let her be the last Clarke. You were never a Clarke, he snarled. You were a virus. And I'm done letting you infect the future. Vivian twisted free. Grabbed the knife. She turned charged toward May. The nursery door exploded inward. Police! May shouted, she's armed. Vivian looked back. Just once. Then she lunged. One officer fired. One shot. Vivian fell, blood spilling across the nursery rug. Right in front of the crib. She died staring at the ceiling. Eyes unblinking. Unmoved. The nursery was warm again. New paint. New windows. New light. The rug was replaced. The crib repainted. But the room still hummed with something sacred. May sat in the rocking chair, tired and radiant. Damon stood beside her, swaddling the baby in a blanket embroidered with soft white stars. Clara Hope Clarke. 7 pounds. 10 ounces. Eyes like her father. Fire like her mother. Damon sat beside May and looked down at the baby's face, impossibly small. Incredibly strong. He bent close and whispered to her. You already survived a war before your first breath. And still, here you are. May smiled, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. She's already stronger than either of us. No, Damon said softly. She's what makes us stronger. The crown bled, but it did not break. The enemy returned, but she did not win. We began as a lie. We fell apart in fire. We rose again with truth. And now, we've built something that can't be stolen. Not an empire. A family. Clara Hope Clarke. Born of war. Built for peace.
Because every broken heart deserves a comeback. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more emotional romance every week. Hit like, drop a comment, and ring the bell so you never miss a moment of betrayal, redemption, and powerful love. And don't keep the drama to yourself, share this story with someone who lives for twists just like you. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is becoming unforgettable.